Hello and welcome to this special edition of Policy Beast. On today's show, we'll be talking to Paul Kendall. He is a candidate for school committee for the municipal election on May 17th. Paul, thank you for joining us on this special edition of Policy Beast.
Thanks for having me.
So Paul, you're running for school committee. Why are you running for school committee?
Well, so my wife and I have been in town for a little over 11 years. And over that time, we've become increasingly involved in the community in a variety of different ways. And as I got involved, I increasingly got asked to participate in various committees and different things. And I've always been a little hesitant because I've kind of been participating in a lot of different things, and I was concerned about going deep in one and sacrificing the ability to participate in others.
What other things have you been involved in around town?
Like Warren Dads at the Warren School, have been involved there. Lots of different project things along with the planning board and different 40Bs and just different things. And I've gone pretty deep in those areas, but it's been pretty broad as well. So the other times I've also had external considerations as well. So I took the commitment very seriously. So I didn't want to, I wanted to be able to devote the time that I thought I needed to devote to those. And I feel it's the right time for me to do that. This is kind of the second time I've been approached about maybe running for school committee. Mm-hmm. And I feel the time is right. I think we have a great group of administrators and a great group on the school committee that I'd like to be a part of it at this point.
So let's jump right into it. You feel like you could make a positive contribution to the town by serving on school committee. What are some of the issues, first and foremost, in your mind right now that are challenging school committee right now? And how do you feel that you could be of some assistance or add a different voice to what's happening?
Well, I don't think I would add necessarily a different voice, or there's not a particular group of things that I have problems with or want to champion. Mm-hmm. But the things that I think I do well is I analyze the data and seek out information. I'm relatively open-minded on opinion, so mm-hmm. Most of my opinions are very well reasoned. So even if I hold an opinion on something, based on new information, I will, that may change over time. And so the key things that I think that the school committee needs to continue the positive momentum they've had. I think the Ashland schools are doing a great job with what they have been given. Mm-hmm. Hopefully the town will see and support the Proposition 2.5 override that will help us get back on track and really move forward. They've been doing a great job, but we need a little bit more resources to ensure that we're going to be able to meet the needs and the vision that the school committee has laid out. So
let's jump into it. You brought up the override. So as many people know, this is a hot topic around town. It's something that people will be able to lend their voice to on May 17th during the election. But you say that Ashland needs this override for the schools and we need it now. Mm-hmm. What are some of the reasons why you think this override is necessary?
Well, and going back to your previous question on what I would bring, one of the things I think I can do very well is collect information on a topic that can be relatively complex, like the override, mm-hmm. And take that data and make it meaningful to someone that doesn't have to take the time to become an expert on the topic. And so when I put together a summary document on the override, so my neighbors and friends could have the information they need to be comfortable with whatever vote they're going to have on May 17th. It wasn't designed to be a pro or con document. And so as I was doing that, the data really, I think speaks for itself.
How so?
Well, if you look at how we are funding our schools and the needs and where the money is going and the rising costs of things like special education and English language learners in school. And the discrepancy in how much state aid we get for our education. I'll give you an example of Holliston, who has a slightly smaller school than we do as far as our population. They get $1.6 million more of state aid than Ashland does.
Why and how does that occur?
It's relatively complicated. It's called Chapter 70 funding, and it's a very complicated formula. One of the probably simplest ways to understand, and this is only one component of it, but it's computed partially by what's called EQV, or equalized valuation. But the state does it in an odd way. They base it off of the total valuation of the entire town, not on a per capita basis. So if you looked at that data, we are slightly have a higher EQV total than Holliston does, but our EQV per capita is lower, which, if you think about it, it makes more sense to do per capita, because that's kind of tells you how many pupils you might be, or students you might be serving with that money. But there's also many other components that equate to that inequity in the funding. But there's that. We have a lot of other issues going on in the schools with overcrowding. We just received the $500,000 from the state to address overcrowding. There's been a space needs committee that has looked at the needs, and we're going to have a reorganization over the next couple of years. We also know that we need a new building, and so that's probably going to start relatively shortly, and that process, and it's a long process. So there's a lot of different interesting things that are coming up as well. That I think someone like me that can take the data, look at it, see how the things interplay, and come up with it. We're going to have to be creative in the short term, certainly, to meet the needs.
So you did a summary document of some of the override issues. I guess I'll be asking you to do a summary of the summary document for our viewers here. That's kind of meta, but because folks are still, I think, trying to get their heads around what it is, what it means, what are some of the risks associated with this, what are some of the benefits. So
yeah,
would you mind sharing some of, maybe give us a little bit of an executive summary of the summary document that...
Well, the summary, which I pared down quite a little bit, is 30 pages, so...
Yeah, so and we won't be reading that into the cameras this evening, but...
So the reason I did it, as I stated, I was frustrated by a couple things, that there was a lot of misinformation out there, whether intentional or not. And it was also not a singular place to go for information on it. There's certainly the YES group that provides it, but it's still kind of just little nips of information. The town has a section on the website about it. But again, it's, you still have to go look for things, and it's not comprehensive.
Right.
So the document kind of steps back and says, okay, well, what is Proposition 2.5? Right. Because I think that is something that people don't truly understand, that they think that if there is an ask for an override, that means there's something wrong. And that's not necessarily the case. It certainly could be. But Proposition 2.5 was designed to create structural deficits. And that's an important piece. And according to the Department of Revenue, since 1996, of the 351 communities in Massachusetts, I think it was 200, I have the information, but it's like 247 have passed over 1,700 overrides since 1996. So it's something that's kind of almost expected to happen, and very few communities have not done it, and those that haven't are either getting that inequitable slice of the Chapter 70 funding, or have revenues that come from other places other than the residential tax base. So, and then the document goes on to summarize the questions. I think the first question, the $1.9 million override, is relatively straightforward as far as understanding it. It's outlined exactly what the monies go for. But then I go pretty in depth on question 2, which I think a lot of people don't understand.
Right.
And what that means and the mechanisms on that. And I think it was pretty well explained last night at town meeting as well, what that means. And that's really for strategic initiatives in the town. And the nice thing about the way they've done it in setting up the Special Stabilization Fund is that if we choose to do that, the choice is still with the voters, because no matter what projects are brought forth to be funded from that, they have to be for the purpose stated with the stabilization fund. So it has to be community and economic development or infrastructure related. So they can't say, hey, we need a new truck or something like that. It can't be just a standard capital purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever warrant article comes to town meeting still needs 2/3 vote by. So it needs support, an overwhelming support by the town in order to move forward. So we still get a choice. Whereas if it was just, hey, a lump sum in the general budget,
Right.
you know, that it's not as clear cut, and we don't have the control. So then the document goes on to just talk about, okay, if somebody's going to ask me for an override, hey, I don't want my taxes to go up any more than anybody else does, right?
Right.
So why are you asking me for it, and how do I know you're going to, be spending that money appropriately? So there's a section on there that where I've asked the town manager and the superintendent of schools what have they been doing to be efficient with the funds and resources that we do have.
So you actually interviewed?
I've spent a lot of time with
Okay.
both Mr. Herbert and Mr. Adams, and I give them a lot of credit for this process. They've gone out, had several forums. Superintendent Adams has been in town late at night, going to people's homes where they've had coffees. He's been at every single forum or public meeting on the override. They've really been forthcoming with as much information as they can. And so I got a lot of information from both of them on the efficiencies that the town's done. Mm-hmm. Some of the highlights would be like some of the things they've done with the healthcare. That's one of the things that allowed the override study committee they formed to kind of switch their focus from just focusing primarily on a structural deficit to saying, okay, well, what do we need for the town to sustain and move forward? Mm-hmm. Because that was a huge savings when last time they changed the healthcare. Another thing is they've regionalized services where it made sense. They've combined IT departments from the school and municipal. And for the school, they made, last year, they made a very strategic decision to cut certain positions as a temporary measure to pay for the learning center development of the learning center at the middle school, which currently only serves 4 students. And that sounds like, wow, it's only 4 students.
Right.
But that's what people really need to understand is, depending on the needs of special education kids, that can be very, very expensive. And if we can't meet the needs in district for those students, we send them out, we have to place them in either private or a public school setting so they can get the services they need. So that was developed for kids with social and emotional needs, and it's servicing 4 of them. And it's projected to save us over $170,000 just this year. And that's an annual savings because those students would be outplaced otherwise.
Right.
And as that grows, that savings it's really a cost avoidance.
It's important to point that outplacement doesn't mean that we're not paying for them.
Yes, we
It's
have
like,
to.
oh, well, if we're outplacing them, then there's, then
Exactly.
that's not, but that's
Yeah.
not the case.
Right.
Right.
So they've been doing that for a long time, and so I think that's important to know that we have leadership in town right now, and certainly historically there've been times when we haven't, but we have leadership right now that is doing a very good job, being fiscally responsible, and I think it's a good time to say, okay, well we need this now. And without it, is everything going to stop? No.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, what are some of the risks associated with not implementing this override right now?
Well, my concern is that because they've been doing these efficiencies and trying to save monies in different areas, at some point you run out of those savings initiatives that you can come up with. And so the cuts that we'd need to make going forward, I think, would be more impactful than they have been. And some people, I have neighbors who have children that just left the schools, and when I told them that, we no longer offer French or something at the high school, they're like, what? They're very surprised by that. So it's very important that we properly fund the schools, and not only that, it's also a perception and the impact of that, even if you don't have kids in school. And one of the things I put in the document is charter schools, and I don't think a lot of residents understand charter schools either.
I don't think a lot of people understand how charter schools work.
Right. So there's school choice, and generically school choice I very much support. And that just says, if I live in Ashland and I don't feel that Ashland is going to meet the needs of my child, I can send them to another district, whether it be Hopkinton or any other district. Sure. And if they have the space and accept the student, then Ashland pays a fee to that other school. And that makes complete sense to me. It says, okay, I'm not going to be bound by my location. And Ashland's done very well, actually, historically, with school choice. We actually, have a net revenue when it comes to school choice. But a similar but differently funded is charter schools, and I know that the governor is high on charter schools and wants to lift the cap on charter schools. But the problem there is that costs a lot of money, and the state aid for that is almost dried up completely. So in 2008, when we last tried an override, and I won't judge whether we should have or should not have passed the override at the time, because again, if we didn't do a good enough job communicating, it shouldn't just be rubber stamped either. But with the combination of that, and there were some leadership issues at the middle school, the charter enrollment doubled after that. And so that meant that more Ashland residents were sending their children to charter schools. And when you go to charter schools, Ashland is responsible for the tuition. And then there's state aid. But to give you an example of how that state aid is dried up, in fiscal year 2014, our tuition for Ashland students going to charter schools was $983,000, and we got $262,000 in state aid. In fiscal year 2015, we sent less kids, and that tuition went to $987,000, and the state aid was $75,000.
Wow. Paul, I hate to cut you off, but we're almost a minute away from wrapping this up.
Okay.
So why should people, after listening to your thoughtful analysis on this override issue in funding schools, why should people get out on May 17th and vote for you?
Well, so I think I don't have a preset agenda, and that if they come and voice a concern at a school committee meeting, that I'll have an open mind about it. I'll look into it. As you can see, I dive deep into a particular topic and try to understand it. And I'm very well reasoned, I think, in that, and objective, and so I think I would be a good voice and listen, and that's all I can say is I'll listen and do the best job I can, and I take the commitment very seriously.
And we're going to leave it right there, Paul. Paul Kendall is running for a school committee on May 17th in our municipal election. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul. And
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching our special election coverage of the May 17th municipal election. Please get out there and vote.